Chapter 2. Setting up the polling station.
The big day is just around the corner. How do we set up the polling station and what's important to remember?
Before we go through the setting up protocol, all staff members are urged to be at the polling station at least 2 days before the official polling time so that they can go about their duties as well as before polling starts. Setting up the polling station is relatively an easy thing, provided you have the time, the necessary material, and the proper space. We will discuss this shortly. The presiding officer must undertake training rehearsals with all polling staff after the polling station is set up. All polling staff must rotate roles and familiarize themselves with the duties and responsibilities required by each position. The presiding officer can also use this opportunity to assess who is best suited for each role. Please note, come polling day, the polling must start at the official time stated by the Commission, and that is 7 a.m. sharp. Now start.
2.1. Setting up the polling station. Colleagues should start by conceptualizing how best to use the space of the polling station. For example, there should be designated ways for voters to get in and out of the polling room.
The day before elections, the presiding officer should attach all the pages of the single-sided voters' roll near the entrance of the polling station. A police officer must be tasked to ensure nobody takes away any of these pages. In case there is risk of the pages being damaged by rain or blown away by strong winds, then this voters' roll should rather be only attached on the outside wall on polling day. The purpose of this voters' roll is to allow voters to confirm that their name is indeed on that particular polling station voters list so that they do not queue unnecessarily in the wrong place. Tables in the polling station should be arranged in such a manner so as to ensure ample workspace for the polling staff and for the placement of ballot boxes and polling booths. The position of the specific polling staff based on their role is also very important to note and to remember. Place chairs or benches for election agents at an appropriate distance so that they can observe the polling officers during voters' verification as well as observe the polling process in general. Make sure that the polling booth is positioned in a manner or position that keeps the marking of the ballot paper hidden from the general view. There should be enough light for people to see when they're in the booth. Take note of the position of windows and whether anyone standing inside or even outside the room can see how anyone is marking their ballot. If required, take appropriate measures, such as covering such windows. Ballot boxes should be placed in the center of the room and in clear view of the presiding officer's desk and the election agents and observers.
If any candidate's posters are within 300 meters of a polling station,
election agents must be instructed to remove them immediately. This is as per Electoral Act, 4th Schedule, Section 160A, subsection 91D. If any candidate posters have not been removed, then the presiding officer may request some of his or her polling staff, along with the police officer, to remove them. Also on polling day, shortly before opening of polls, you must make sure to put up direction posters in appropriate places.
Wow, you're really fully prepared.
Well, of course, preparation is always key. And now moving on to Chapter 2.2, Roles and Responsibilities in the Polling Station.
Time to prepare the election staff. What are election roles and how do they work? As mentioned earlier, there will be a number of people working at the polling station. The presiding officer being the overall head of the polling station. Furthermore, there will be
an usher,
a voters' roll officer,
an indelible ink marking officer,
a ballot paper issuer, and
a recording officer.
In addition, there will be at least 2 police officers on duty at every polling station. That's a lot. What is the job of an election agent?
Election agents represent a candidate. They may be present before the polls open right through to the end of the poll, observing the election process. If an election agent sees and notes an irregularity in the conduct of the poll or the counting, he or she must bring such an irregularity to the attention of the presiding officer. Each candidate may appoint up to 3 election agents at any polling station that the candidate is contesting. However, only 1 election agent is permitted inside the polling station at any single time, according to Section 55(2)(a).
But how does the presiding officer identify an election agent, Charlene?
Oh, well, that's quite simple. A presiding officer must check the election agent's list and confirm the agent's name and other details. Every presiding officer should collect a duly completed declaration of secrecy form, that's Form V19, from all election agents. All election agents are required to submit these forms too. The presiding officer will then fill in the election agent's details on an election agent's badge before handing them over.
If that is the job of the election agents, what is the function of the election observers?
Election observers may also be present to observe the polling process. The presiding officer, after verifying their credentials, will then allow them to observe the election process as long as it doesn't hinder the process or compromise the secrecy of the ballot.
What if a disruptive situation arises at the polling station? How do people deal with it?
Well, police officers will be stationed at the polling station and will be able to deal with any emergency under the direction and the instruction of the presiding officer. The police may only act within a 300-meter radius of the polling station when the presiding officer instructs them to do so. Again, a police officer must not act on his or her own. They only get a go-ahead to act from the presiding officer.